Welcome to Fire Prevention FFP 1505, Chapter 5, the Fire Inspection Process. Learning Objective 1 is to describe the basic goals and objectives of conducting a fire inspection. So what is a fire inspection? You can look on page 80 at the key term. It says to determine the compliance with a fire safety code or standard. But better yet, look on the first paragraph of page 80 in the text. It says it is a systematic examination of a building, the hazardous processes within the building, and the occupants' behavior in order to determine if they conform to an adopted fire safety standard. So inspections ensure adherence to standards and codes, and they are the foundation of an effective prevention program. If you'll recall the 3 E's, establishing relationship between fire and building code enforcement and educating occupants to change safety attitudes and behavior, engineering, enforcement, and education. Codes dictate engineering concepts of fire-safe building design and occupancy, and they are maintenance-oriented, meaning that they are intended to maintain the requirements of the building code under which the structure was originally built. A fire inspector must enforce codes and educate occupants to avoid violations. Enforcement of fire code has 3 objectives. 1. To separate potential ignition sources from potential fuel sources and correct any hazardous acts that bring them together. 2. To ensure the safety of the occupants should a fire occur by making sure that the egress is properly designed and protected, that the fire alarm systems operate, and that interior finished materials will not accelerate the spread of the fire. And finally, 3. Confirm that both passive and active fire protection features such as fire doors, fire dampeners, automatic sprinkler systems, and fire pumps operate and are properly tested. These objectives can be achieved only through a combination of enforcement of code regulations, basic knowledge of the building code requirements, and educating the occupants in proper safety behavior. Fire code enforcement centers on preventative measures that provide for the safe conduct and operation of hazardous processes, storage of combustibles and flammable materials, maintenance of fire protection and extinguishing systems, safe exiting, and good housekeeping. An inspection should look at, verify, and document the quantity and arrangement of potential fuel sources. It should identify the potential ignition sources and examine the passive and active fire prevention systems. Changing occupant behavior will require the inspector to conduct follow-up inspections, including participating in fire safety and evacuation planning, conducting fire drills, training employees in the use of portable extinguishers, and explaining why fire hazards need to be addressed. Each jurisdiction may determine inspection priorities, usually according to a risk assessment system. Frequency and building types are established by codes in the jurisdictions. Inspections are usually divided by districts or zones. Larger fire departments may establish both inspection districts and specialty inspection areas. Specialty inspection areas may include high-rises, hospitals, schools, warehouses, industrial complexes, and public assemblies. Specialized inspection units usually consist of a senior fire inspector with specialized training and knowledge about these specific large and complex inspections. Buildings are categorized by use and occupancy. Categories are established by the building code. An assembly is a place where people gather for political, religious, or entertainment purposes. These places usually have a large occupant load and are subdivided into classes based on the level of hazard and the number of occupants permitted. Examples: A1 are movies, A2 are nightclubs, A3 are restaurants. Businesses are commercial offices that provide services with limited amounts of storage, examples being doctors' or lawyers' offices. Mercantile or commercial facilities open to the public, selling goods and products. Examples are hardware stores and supermarkets. Institutions are facilities where occupants are restrained or need assistance to evacuate, like nursing homes. Storage facilities generally are not open to the public, and they're subdivided based on the flammability of the materials being stored. An S1 is combustible and limited flammable liquid storage. S2 is non-combustible storage, such as metal pipes. Educational are buildings for education from kindergarten to 12th grade. Note, this does not include a college. Factories are places where raw materials are reformed into some type of product, and they're subdivided based on the combustibility and flammability of the materials used. High hazards are facilities using hazardous materials over the exempt amount permitted by the building code. These are subdivided by hazard. Residential are buildings in which people reside and sleep, and they are subdivided based upon the occupant's familiarity with the building. Examples: R1 are hotels and motels, R2 are apartments and multifamily dwellings, R3 are 1 and 2 family homes. Utilities are structures that generally are not occupied but require construction permits, such as water towers, fences, sheds, and garages. Mixed-use occupancies must be separated if any high-hazard uses are identified. These are allowed by building code to be unseparated if less than 10% of the total area involves high-hazard use. If greater, fire separation walls or fire barriers must separate the uses. Inspectors must pay particular attention to F1 factories, S1 storage, and M mercantile facilities. These can become H use by exceeding permitted quantities of hazardous materials. Inspectors must confirm the building use matches the certificate of occupancy, and changes in use require construction official approval or code conformance. There are two models for inspections: the permit model and the inspection model. Occupancies with specific life safety hazards, including places of public assembly, hotels, motels, or warehouses with large quantities of flammable and combustible liquids of hazardous materials, require permits to operate. Permit fees and thresholds are determined by ordinance or state regulation. These occupancies with specific life safety hazards require a permit to operate. The building operator must obtain a permit, and it is unlawful to operate the business without one. Violation of conditions of the permit can lead to a revocation of his license, and the building must be inspected before the owner can begin operations. Because all permits must be inspected before they are allowed to operate, owners usually will not prohibit fire inspectors from conducting the inspection, even though they retain their constitutional right to do so. In the inspection model, fees may also be generated annually for conducting the fire inspection. These type of inspections and cycles are determined by ordinance. This model allows greater flexibility in scheduling because the business operation is not dependent on a permit. Violations do not necessarily shut down the business. Most codes allow reasonable time to correct violations, but have penalties to encourage code compliance. Many state and local jurisdictions use a combination of the two models, with permits required for certain processes or structures, and others being identified by building use and inspection schedule. Jurisdictions should establish their inspection priorities. Buildings should be sorted based on the result of a risk assessment into target hazards, with priorities based on their risk exposure. Risk categories are generally based on the number of exposed occupants in the building, hazards of the process conducted or materials stored, and economic impact to the community if the building catches fire, such as a structure that is significant to the tax base or a large employer. These must be inspected regularly to protect jobs and the economic health of the community or the nation. Target hazards can be categorized as life safety, economic, or special. For example, places of assembly, large apartment complexes, high-rise residential and business facilities, outdoor sports complexes, schools, universities, and so on. Because of the large occupant load, these properties should be inspected frequently to reduce fire hazards and ensure emergency preparation in the event of a fire. Special hazard targets are facilities with appreciable hazardous materials, facilities that could cause an environmental or economic disaster, including critical infrastructure. Schedules differ based on the specific target group. Special hazard targets, including buildings vital to the quality of life in the community, such as City Hall, police stations, firehouses, sewer treatment facilities, and electric plants. Routine inspections can be inspected based on two systems: seasonal and block. Seasonal use and occupancy require inspections at specific times of the calendar year, for instance, schools and summer and winter resorts. These may be driven by specific holidays such as Halloween, Christmas, and New Year's Day. A school may get a complete inspection in late June so that corrections can be made before the school's opening in September. Block inspections are by geographical area and allow inspectors to see property under normal operating conditions. These inspections involve the fire inspector being assigned to a specific street, district, or zone to go for unscheduled cold calls until all inspections are completed. With cold calls, the owner may not be available or may not be convenient. Fire inspectors need to be aware of the date of the last inspection in that block and be flexible enough to reschedule if needed so as to not overly inconvenience businesses. Businesses should be inspected in accordance with the established ordinance cycle. Owners may see housing inspectors, elevator inspectors, health inspectors, and property as well. Most fire codes require some level of interagency code coordination to avoid the issue of businesses dealing with so many inspecting agencies at one time. Coordination among agencies may help and make for much better community relations. Generally, scheduled inspections are required for time-consuming inspections at large facilities. Inspectors should give owners at least 1 week's notice. This allows for smoother inspection processes and gives owners time to correct obvious violations and gather required documentation. This information is necessary for review by inspectors before the inspection. Informing the building owner of the documents and test reports that the inspector must review makes the inspection much easier. The inspector can establish the date and time of the inspection, whom the inspector should meet with, and ensure that keys will be available to secure areas that documentation will be gathered for review at the property. Proper tools and equipment are necessary for each specific type of inspection. Professional appearance is mandatory and includes a clean and pressed uniform, proper footwear, and credentials. Owners are more likely to challenge your authority in inspection results if you do not look professional. Coveralls can be used if you may get dirty. You need a properly marked vehicle, a department radio, flashlight with spare batteries, 25-foot tape measure, hard hat, safety glasses, clipboard, pens, pencils, and forms, handheld computer and spare batteries, and small digital camera. This list of tools is the minimum the fire inspector should carry in a vehicle at all times. Other possible equipment includes a portable fire extinguisher, first aid equipment, hydrant and gas wrenches, caution tape, and turnout gear is optional. Fire departments are usually one of the most respected departments in the city or county government. Please don't blow this. Always maintain a professional appearance. A customer will lose respect for a sloppy or disorganized inspector and will question everything the inspector identifies as a code violation. You need to be personal and friendly, yet professional. This will reduce apprehension that the customer may feel when you approach in a uniform. You need to answer questions honestly. If you're unsure of the correct answer, do not make something up. Tell them you will research the information and get back to them. And don't forget to do that. Using a professional approach will make your job easier, and the customer will be more satisfied about the inspection process. Remember to keep your appointments and call if you're running late or reschedule. In order for an inspector to enter private property, the owner or agent must give permission. Demanding entry is a legal term and can legally be refused. You must have the owner's permission, a court order, or certain specific conditions must exist. You should always present credentials and state the nature of your inspection request. Fire inspectors have police powers per the 10th Amendment, which states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." The 4th and 14th Amendments protect owners from unreasonable search and seizure. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So you can gain access with an administrative warrant, but first you must convince a judge that the fire inspection is warranted and that failure to conduct an inspection could cause harm to the public or occupants of the building. The courts have ruled that to conduct a fire inspection you must have the legal permission of the owner, and when an owner refuses entry, you must obtain an administrative search warrant based on probable cause to continue your inspection. Without permission to enter, no violation will stand up in court because the evidence will be deemed to have been obtained illegally. There are 4 ways to legally enter a property. 1. An exigent circumstance including fire or other imminent hazard. Then warrantless entry is permitted to mitigate an emergency. 2. Areas that are open to the general public during public operating hours. 3. The owner or agent gives you permission to conduct the fire inspection, although permission can be revoked at any time, and once revoked you must leave the premises. And 4. The owner or agent refuses entry and you obtain an administrative search warrant from a court or competent jurisdiction. The third learning objective is to describe the importance of information gathered in the pre-inspection file review. Inspection should always begin with examination of the building record or file. The inspection may be complicated, and this information will help. The building file or record should include the street address, lot and block, owner and agent's name, telephone numbers, and mailing addresses. General description of the building includes height, area, type of construction, utilities, fire protection features such as fire alarms or sprinkler systems, the location of fire department connections, and other items. The last notice of violation lists violations encountered during previous inspections. Fire code variance explains the condition of variance so the fire inspector can confirm continued code compliance. Other pertinent documents include any owner correspondence, permits, building registrations, certificates of approval for fire protection systems, test record for fire systems, and hazardous materials inventories from previous inspections. You should also review all applicable fire codes and NFPA standards and checklists. Checklists are a good reference but must be supported by reviewing the applicable fire codes and standards. This is extremely important in technical inspections involving hazardous processes or hazardous materials. The fourth learning objective is to conduct a systematic inspection of a property. The key word here is systematic. You must use a system or method. To begin with, make sure you have a working pen, agency identification, necessary forms, clipboard, and all the rest of the equipment that we listed previously. You may not be taking all these items with you, but they should be available and ready in the car if needed. It's a good idea to begin on the outside of the building. Initial observations from outside may include the street address, the main entrance, fire department connections, utility locations, and the nearest hydrant, exposed buildings, and the general condition of the building and the surrounding grounds. Be patient waiting for the owner, especially during cold calls. If the owner or designee accompanies you, ask them to bring keys to all areas of the building. If they cannot, either on a scheduled inspection or a cold call, reschedule the inspection within a week and ask the manager who has access to all areas of the building to accompany you. At the beginning of the process, advise the owner what documents you need to see. This gives the owner time to gather them before you leave. You must remember why you were there. Number 1, to identify fire safety violations under the code and have them corrected. Violations must be recorded in an organized manner because it will be presented to the building owner. If it is clear, concise, and complete, compliance is more likely to occur. However, equally important is your responsibility to gather building intelligence for use by the fire department during emergencies. This includes the type of building construction, the occupancy and use, the height and area, types of fire protection systems, and you need to identify special hazards or firefighter safety concerns. Special hazards may include flammable liquids or hazardous materials. Make sure this information is systematically forwarded to the appropriate first and second response units as well as the communication center. After inspection of the exterior, enter the building and proceed to the roof. Examine fire protection features visible on the roof, including the location of firewalls and hazardous exhaust systems and ventilators. Examine the smoke exhaust system or fire vents if applicable. Examine firefighter roof access and determine the roof covering. Serious leaks in the roof can cause structural damage and may result in early collapse of the building in a fire. If the roof is supported on steel or wooden trusses or steel or wooden I-beams, it may require identification signs at the main entrance for firefighter safety. Florida requires firefighter warning signs for truss construction. Always use a pattern of movement and record information to permit better organization of information in the report. Begin at the roof and work down. Maintain a consistent pattern of movement clockwise or counterclockwise, identifying landmarks or streets, anchor points such as stair numbers. Stair enclosures can act as an anchor point on each floor for orientation. Use a systematic observation pattern. Scan each room in 3 layers: ceiling, walls, and floors. If the building is a residential apartment building or condominium, the fire inspector will need permission to enter each unit or a warrant for each unit to enter dwelling units. Codes usually exclude inspection of the dwelling unit, just like single-family residences. The building manager may have right of entry under the apartment lease or agreement. However, this is not always the case and should be checked. It is better to ask permission of the occupant before entering the unit. If an area cannot be accessed because of a locked door, make a note on the report and tell the owner that access will be required at a later date. NFPA 10, Standard for Portable Fire Extinguishers, requires extinguishers in every type of use occupancy except 1 and 2 family dwellings. Fire Prevention Code lists installation, maintenance, and inspection requirements for extinguishers. They are rated based on the effectiveness on the classes of fire. Class A is ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, cardboard. Class B is flammable and combustible liquids. Class C, energized electrical equipment. Class D, flammable or combustible metals. Class K, kitchens with grease and vegetable oils. You should inspect for the correct placement and travel distance as determined by the hazard classification of the building. The key for the inspector relative to extinguishers is to ensure the extinguisher is the proper type for the hazard. The travel distance for ordinary hazards, according to the table on page 98, is 30 to 50 feet. Remember, inspect to ensure the extinguishers are the proper size and type, they are mounted at the correct height, they're visible and not obstructed, they are charged with a current service tag, if 5 or more years old they've been hydrostatically tested, and confirm the owner provides training. The most critical part of the inspection process is the closing interview because it allows for discussion of both positive findings and fire code violations. It should include a discussion of serious code violations and should not focus on minor violations. The inspector should develop a checklist of serious violations that require correction or may be expensive to correct, and these should be the subject of the closing interview. Discussing minor violations may seem like nitpicking, so save them for the written report. Begin the interview on a positive note by telling the owner the things you observed that had a positive effect on building safety. Discuss the important inspection points, the nature of the violation, the risk involved, and the options for correcting it. Making suggestions is not correcting the violation, it is presenting viable options to solve or mitigate a problem. Establish a working relationship with the building owner. You should not be the adversary of the customer, but should be their partner in helping them to comply, thus providing greater public safety. A good professional relationship will reduce the fire code violations and ensure compliance into the future. A good closing interview will leave the customer less apprehensive about what needs to be accomplished to gain compliance and will make the owner more confident that the fire inspection was a worthwhile experience. The final learning objective is to summarize the importance of the organization and the notes to make a fire inspection report. The inspection report is the vehicle by which compliance is gained. If field notes are organized and systematically taken during the inspection tour, the inspection report will be well organized and easy to follow, and easier for the owner to comply with. The inspection report may be used as evidence in a hearing or court of law and should not be left to memory, so taking organized notes during the inspection is critical. The beginning of the report includes the need-to-know information like the date of the inspection, the building address, the building use, the group, the business name, the name of the owner agents, and telephone numbers of the premises. It may also include nice-to-know information that can be helpful later, including the building construction type, the height and area, type of utilities, emergency shutoff locations, fire department specific information such as the location of fire alarm control panels, sprinkler system control valves, FD connections, system maintenance contractors, 24-hour emergency contact numbers, and location of lock or Knox box, and the right to know information. The beginning of the report is helpful to firefighters in preparation of fire department pre-plans. The report may be computer generated or generated automatically by computer programs or typed into a computer form from the inspector's field notes. It should never be handwritten, as this may appear unprofessional and not always be legible or easy to read. It should be clear, concise, and complete, and must comply with legal requirements of regulation. It may also need to be in a specific format or in a specific inspection form. A certificate of inspection is issued to an owner upon satisfactorily complying with Fire Prevention Code. It is issued at the completion of the inspection and may be a final inspection report, listing abatements of all violations. The inspection is not complete until all code violations and outstanding issues are resolved. Outstanding issues can include monetary penalties, inspection fees, or properly resolved appeal hearings. Certificates should be posted publicly and may also be updated quarterly in large places of public assembly to ensure compliance with life safety requirements. This is established by the inspection cycle specified in the jurisdiction's adopted codes. Typically, the Fire Prevention Bureau issues inspection compliance certificates annually. Finally, what was learned? Number 1, the basic goals and objectives of conducting a fire inspection is to determine compliance with the fire safety code or standard. Better yet, it is a systematic examination of the building, the hazardous processes within the building, and the occupants' behavior in order to determine if they conform to an adopted fire safety standard. 2, there are 4 ways to legally enter property to conduct a fire inspection. You should always present credentials and state the nature of your inspection request. Then you must 1, have legal permission from the owner or legal resident, or 2, when an owner refuses entry, you must obtain an administrative search warrant based on a probable cause to continue your inspection, or 3, an exigent circumstance permits warrantless entry to mitigate an emergency, and finally 4, areas that are open to the general public during public operating hours allow you to inspect those areas. 3, you conduct a systematic inspection of the property by being professional and developing a method so you don't overlook anything. 4, the importance of the pre-inspection fire review is that the inspection may be complicated and you need all the info you can find to help you not miss things. 4, the importance of the pre-inspection fire review is that the inspection may be complicated and you need all the information you can to help you not miss anything. 5, why is it important to organize your notes to make a fire inspection report? Because the inspection report is the vehicle by which compliance is gained. And if your field notes are organized and were systematically taken during the inspection report will be well organized and easy to follow and easier for the owner to comply with. It may also end up being evidence in a hearing or a court of law.